Have you ever played the board game Monopoly? Have you ever wondered how to win the game of Monopoly in real life? Are you sick and tired of always being this guy? Do you want to learn how to turn a single greenhouse into a bunch of red hotels? In this video, I'll show you exactly how to become Mr. Moneybags and build an empire big enough to turn the game of Monopoly into reality. All right, guys, you ready to play? More importantly, are you ready to win? Before we dive into the specifics of how to play the game of Monopoly, you might be interested to know that Monopoly was actually based off of a game called the Landlord's Game. Originally created by the Georgist feminist Lizzie McGee in 1903. Kind of rhymes, doesn't it? Anyway, the Landlord's Game was intended to show that rents enriched property owners and impoverished tenants.
She wanted a game that would teach people how awful it was to have a money-grubbing landlord who gouged you on your rents.
And that the government shouldn't tax non-landowners, but should instead tax landowners and push for a universal land tax, the surplus of which should obviously go to the people, right? Key teachable moment. In case your parents didn't instill a basic code of ethics in you as a child, and let's be honest, based off of society today, chances are they haven't. Let me go ahead and explain a little bit about what old Lizzie is trying to convey. She is saying that the government should steal money from those who actually provide a valuable service to society, and then the government should give that stolen money to people who have not worked for it or provided any value to earn the stolen money. Okay, we're all on the same page now, right? Good. Let's move on. Charles Darrow actually created the game Monopoly in the 1930s, and it was sold and mass-produced by the Parker brothers starting in 1933. It was a huge hit, and it sold millions of copies in the United States and worldwide, today becoming one of the most iconic games that the Parker brothers released. The Landlord's Game was a far cry from the current Monopoly game's lessons of proper money management, real estate investing, how to properly leverage debt to increase your cash flow, and the multitude of other extremely valuable lessons in finance that the game teaches those who play the game. Considering Charles Darrow became the first millionaire game designer, and Lizzie McGee barely made $500 off her futile attempt to show the evils of being a landlord, I'd say it's pretty obvious who took the right and ethical approach.
Ironically, what happened was owning groups of land was glorified.
All right, guys, let's go back to the original problem of turning a single greenhouse into a red hotel. The first thing we need to do is to define what a greenhouse is and what a red hotel is. A greenhouse in Monopoly represents a single asset in a particular asset class. For the sake of this video, I'm going to use a single family house, just like the one I bought off of Park Place, as an example of a single asset. Seriously though, is there a better name for a rental than Park Place? A red hotel in Monopoly doesn't necessarily represent an actual hotel, but instead represents a much bigger asset than a single house. This could be an apartment complex, a mobile home park, a storage facility, or even an RV park, just like this one. A title deed card represents ownership and control over a particular property in the game. If you hold a title deed card for a specific property in the game of Monopoly, or in real life, you control the rent and thus the income of the property. Then you got to make your most important decision of the game, and that's which piece you're going to be. Go ahead and comment below which piece you always take and why. As for me, I'm kind of partial to the bag of money. Not really sure why. Now that we have our game pieces defined, let's go over the purpose of the game. In the game of Monopoly, the purpose of the game is to be the only player left with any money at the end of the game. Your goal is to bankrupt every other player and win. Now, I have two problems with that idea. It's not the socialist or collectivist reasons you've probably heard from the non-producers who demand that the producers fund the non-producers. In real-life Monopoly, it's actually beneficial for the other players to become independently wealthy and successful, as it creates healthy market competition and ensures that products and services are improved as time goes on. Reason number two is that winning is typically pretty independent of the success or failure of other individuals. And winning is not a zero-sum game, meaning you don't need others to lose in order for you to win. The way that you become the wealthiest individual is to buy the most properties in the most strategic locations and charge the maximum amount of rent, thus encouraging other tenants to more frequently pay you the maximum amount of rent and thus transfer their money into your hands, making you the winner. The game of Monopoly and real-life Monopoly actually line up very well in this regard.
However, in the game of Monopoly, the players who land on your property are required by the rules of the game to pay you. Otherwise, they would just not pay you, and we could just call it, Monopoly 2020.
For almost 2 years, the 2020 eviction moratorium has blocked landlords from evicting tenants who can't afford to pay rent.
In real-life Monopoly, landlords and tenants enter into voluntary contracts that are legal and binding. Both parties agree to the terms and condition of the legal binding contracts, and neither party is under any obligation to sign unless both parties agree that the contract is fair and accurate.
Okay, so we've discussed the types of properties, the purpose of the game, and the rules of the game. Now all we have to do is figure out how to actually get control of all of those cash flowing properties so that tenants can pay us tons of money and we can win the real life game of Monopoly. Simple, right? Actually, it is very simple. It just isn't that easy.
The first thing we need to do is buy a single property. There are many ways to do this, which I've covered in many of my other previous videos, which you should definitely go check out. No, not right now. Not right now. Stay here. We've got some learning to do. Go look at those later. Feel free to like and subscribe while you're at it. However, I'm going to keep it pretty simple, and we're going to stick to a pretty standard scenario for this particular video. You find a house in a decent neighborhood for $100,000, and you determine that you can rent it out for $1,500 a month. You go and get a 75% loan-to-value loan from a bank, and you're required to put down $25,000 as a down payment. Your mortgage and all of your expenses come out to $800 a month. So you're cash flowing $700 a month or $8,400 a year. Woohoo! You can afford that nice vacation you've been wanting to take, and your tenants paid for the whole thing, plus the bar tab. Now that you've gotten a taste for cash flowing real estate, your appetite has been whetted and you're ready for the next one. You find another property for sale for $100,000 and you repeat the process that you just did, putting $25,000 down as a down payment and cash flowing $700 a month or $8,400 a year. Now you've taken $50,000 and turned it into $16,800 a year or a 33.6% return. You do this process 2 more times for a total of $100,000 invested, which is $25,000 down times 4 properties. And your annual cash flow has jumped from $8,400 a year to $16,800 a year to $25,200 a year to now $33,600 a year. The cool thing is that after 1 year, you decide that you're going to raise the rents by $100 a month, or $4,800 total across the 4 properties. So now your return just jumped from 33.6% to 38.4%. Good job, guys. If you guys think that's cool, here's where things go absolutely bonkers.
While you really enjoy taking awesome vacations, going on fishing trips, buying flowers for your wife, and cutting back on the overtime hours at your 9-to-5 job, all paid for by your tenants, I might add, you wonder if there is a way that you could do better. Oh yeah, you can absolutely do better. In the game of Monopoly, you are able to charge an exponentially higher amount of rent as you add more and more houses to your property. This is a very important real-life lesson taught by the game. In real-life Monopoly, as you add more and more properties to your portfolio, especially if they're in a relatively central location, you get what is called economy of scale. This tends to cause your expenses to go way down and thus your net profits to go way up. In our example, we kept the rent increases pretty minimal, but what if, due to economy of scale, your monthly expenses went from $800 a month to only $650 a month? That would be the equivalent of increasing the rent on each and every property by another $150 a month. This increases your net return on your original $100,000 from 38.4% to 45.6%.
I don't know about you guys, but I really love a good magic trick. One show that I've really been enjoying a lot lately is called Fool Us,
where the great Penn and Teller invite the most talented magicians in the world to try and stump them with some of the most insanely impressive sleights of hand you could ever imagine.
Well, if you're like me and you wish that you could do magic that would make Penn and Teller proud, I'm here to tell you that you too can be a magician. In the game of Monopoly, after you place 4 greenhouses on one of your properties, you've already raised rents per unit by an incredible amount. That's cool and all, but not really all that magical. So where's the magic at? Well, this is where I think the game of Monopoly sort of misses the mark when it comes to teaching the mechanics of being a real estate entrepreneur. The game hints at something magical, but it doesn't really do a good enough job to fool the judges. Look right here where it says mortgage value. What this means is that if you run out of money, i.e. you didn't keep enough cash reserves in your account and came up short, you can mortgage your property with the bank, and the bank will loan you a very small amount that you can use to keep the wolves at bay. Unless, of course, you land on my Park Place property with a hotel. Then you're screwed. Here's why I think the game of Monopoly misses the mark. In the game of Monopoly, you're only allowed to mortgage a very small fraction of the total value of your property. In real life Monopoly, the banks will allow you to mortgage anywhere from 75% up to 100%, and sometimes even more, of the current value of your property. Now, the normal amount is about 75%, so for the sake of argument, we're going to use 75% for the remainder of this video. I mentioned earlier that you want to convert 4 single-family houses into 1 red hotel. Let's use the real-world example of converting 4 single-family homes into a 50-unit apartment complex. You bought those 4 single-family homes for $100,000 apiece, and you've been renting them consistently for the past 5 years. You occasionally have a toilet that needs to be fixed or an HVAC unit that needs to be serviced or repaired, and you even had to replace a roof due to the age and it started leaking. But you haven't really noticed any of those things because you did the right thing and had a CapEx budget, and you hired a pretty good maintenance man that can do a good job and fix any of those pop-up repairs. So being a good investor, you are looking around and you come across a 50-unit apartment complex listed for $2.4 million. You decide it's time to take my game to the next level, but how am I going to raise the money to buy this property? Remember that whole magic part? Here's where you should be watching the magician's hands.
You go to the bank and tell them you have a 50-unit apartment complex you are trying to buy, but you aren't sure how to fund the down payment. Well, that bank president, whom you've been building a relationship with over the last 5 years, suggests that you could use the equity you have in your 4 single-family homes and apply that equity to your newest endeavor. You, being a smart investor, nod your head and say, okay, let's do it.
You might be wanting to ask me what that all looks like, right? Go ahead, ask me. What? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me explain. You originally purchased 4 properties for $100,000 apiece, but you were only required to bring $25,000 down to own and control the property, also realizing 100% of the benefits of owning real estate. Let's say you bought these properties 5 years ago, and in that 5 years, property values have increased from the $100,000 you paid for it to $200,000. And that's really not all that crazy considering what we're seeing in the current market. So now your properties are worth $200,000 a piece, or $800,000 total. The bank informs you that you can take out up to 75% of the appraised value of your property, or $600,000, and you will get that cash at closing. Keep in mind, you originally only invested how much? Yeah, $100,000. So you literally just turned $100,000 into $600,000 plus over $800,000 worth of assets under management in just 5 years. Congratulations, guys. You did a great job playing the game of Monopoly. But that's just the intro trick, guys. We still have the final act to witness. Remember, we had to find enough money to buy a 50-unit, $2.4 million property. Where are we going to find $2.4 million? That's right. You already found it. And you didn't even see the trick, did you?
Say what?
Well, I'm going to show you how the trick was just done. Remember, the bank already told you that they would be giving you 75% of the appraised value of your properties. Guess what else they'll do? That's right. They will loan you 75% of the purchase price of the $2.4 million property that you're trying to buy, which just so happens to be $1.8 million. So you just need to find 25% of the purchase price, and you will be the proud owner of a 50-unit apartment complex and still have your 4 original units that you bought 5 years ago. The trick is you already have the 25%, don't you? You still have the $600,000 that you pulled out of the 4 properties that you just refinanced with the bank, which just so happens to be 25% of that $2.4 million. Now, owning 54 units of real estate is pretty cool, but Jake, it's got to be really expensive with the mortgages, the property management, the taxes, and the insurance and all that stuff, right? While it is true that the total expenses will most definitely go up as you add more and more properties to your portfolio, it's also true that your income will go way up. Without going into too much particular detail in this specific video, if you charge only $800 a month, which in this market is very reasonable, and you operate at a 40% expense ratio, keep in mind that doesn't include your mortgage, that's extra, you will gross $288,000 in annual income for your properties. With an $8,600 a month mortgage payment, you will be left with a net cash flow at the end of the year of $69,600 in your pocket. Not to mention, you've still got those 4 little guys that are churning out a ton of cash flow every month as well. Well, it's amazing to generate almost $100,000 a year of passive income. Do you remember what your original investment was? That's right, $100,000. You took $100,000 of an investment and turned it into $3.2 million worth of assets under management, added 54 units of real estate properties to your portfolio, and created a passive income of about $100,000 when you add in those 4 original properties that you had. What did I tell you? Magic.